All right, the last couple things I'm going to talk about, one of them is called a CSS filter. Okay. So I'm sure you guys all know what a filter is. You're the sort of Instagram, TikTok generation. A filter is an algorithm that can change the way that an image or a video looks, right? Now, traditionally, if you wanted to take an image and apply a filter, you would have to take it to either a photo program like, Adobe Photoshop or Photopea or something like After Effects or something like that. So for instance, I could take this image, I'm in Photopea, and I could apply an adjustment, and that adjustment could make my image, say, black and white. Um, don't worry about some of what I'm doing here, but there were other things I could do, like, uh, tint my image, and I can make it this is what we call like a sepia tone. Oops. No, we can't move here. There you go, like an old timey photo. Okay. Now, the thing about this is obviously if we were going to apply this in a web page, you would have to take the photo into a program like Photoshop or Photopea, edit it, and then bring it back to your root folder, right? Well, actually, we can apply some of this stuff through CSS. Okay. So I'm going to show you guys how we can do that. I have this image here. And what you can actually do is browsers now have built-in CSS filters that you can take advantage of. It doesn't have like every filter ever in Photoshop or Photopea, but it has ones like sepia, grayscale, um, blur, hue rotation, which means it kind of tints it a different color. So what I'm going to do is let's look at my page here. Here's my image. Okay. And what I'm going to do is, let's say I wanted to make this a sepia tone. Well, I could say, let's select that image and let's do, I believe it is filter, right? Filter and then sepia. Now, most of them are a percentage, which means how much percentage of that effect do you want to apply? So 100% would mean like a full sepia tone. 50% would be like a half percentage applied. So if I go back, there you go. That's 100%. If I set it to 50%, it'll only be a half percentage, so it's a little less intense. And then 0 would mean like basically no sepia applied. Okay. Some other type of filters I could play would be like a grayscale. Grayscale would take your image, usually it's a color, and make it into a black and white, aka grayscale image. Okay. I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but hopefully you get kind of the idea here. Um, Contrast would increase the contrast of the image. Don't know if that's necessarily what you want. If I were to do a low percentage of this, this would make it like a less intense image. It's like kind of more grayish now. Blur. Blur actually doesn't work on percentage. It works on pixel amount. How many pixel of blur do you want? So if I did, let's say 10 pixels, that should make it relatively blurry. Okay. I'll lower it to maybe like 1 pixel. Okay. Saturate would make the colors more saturated or intense. Here it's a little less, but oops. I made this 0. That should make it actually more of a grayscale. Yeah, there you go. So at 50% saturate, we kind of lower the intensity of those colors. And then a hue rotate, this is kind of where you change the base color. A hue rotate it actually works on 360 degrees. So the way it works is that the default coloring is 0, and then you kind of move around the color wheel using degrees. Okay. So the way it kind of works is like this is like your default lighting. Like this is typically, but then you sort of like, let's say this is normally red. Like here, let me try to explain it. It's a little hard if you're not really used to it, but it's like if you had a color wheel, I just want a very basic color wheel here. If red is the default color and you were to rotate it 180 degrees, you're basically swapping it to the other side of the color wheel. So then red becomes green, yellow becomes purple, blue becomes orange. If I only did it 90 degrees, then red becomes orange or yellowish. Orange becomes green, green becomes blue, blue becomes purple. So everything kind of shifts down. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. So if I do a hue rotate of 180 degrees, that means I'm basically swapping every color with the opposite color of it. It gives you kind of this kind of weird, unique thing here. That's the most intense. If I did like 90, it actually kind of looks more intense there, even though it's actually closer. But all right. So that's, this is all CSS. I have not changed the original image in any way, but I've been using CSS to kind of affect my images. Now, the way this could be kind of interesting is, all right, let's say I had a a slideshow, and I wanted to kind of put emphasis on one image. What I could do is I'm going to take all of the images here, and let's just kind of use filter, grayscale, and I'm going to set it to 100%. And then when you hover, let's take that and make it 0%. In other words, I'm removing the grayscale. See that? If you even want to use kind of what we've been talking about today, we could even throw a transition in there. You get this kind of nice effect. Okay. Or another way to do this is, what if I did like a blur of 1 pixel? And then when you go on top, it's a blur of 0 pixels. So no blur. So see how it's kind of blurry, and then it becomes clear. It's a subtle little effect, but you could see how, you could, do for, let's say you had like a fashion website with a lot of photos and you wanted to kind of hone them in on a particular photo. You could see how something like this might be kind of useful to kind of draw people's attention towards them. Okay. All right. Last thing I want to talk about is what is referred to as a pseudo element. Okay, we've talked about pseudo classes before. A pseudo class is like the hover, or there's a few others like this. Like sorry, I'm having such a brain fart today. Visited, link, active, focus. There's more than this, but these are some of the more popular ones. A pseudo element is an element that you can select, that it's not a state of something. It's a part of an element. Okay. So for instance, if I wanted to, I could take the first letter of this word, this subpart of this tag, and affect just this. So for instance, what I've done is I've said take the H1 and then take the first letter, which is the pseudo element of it, the sub part of this, and affect it, and then affect just that first letter. Okay. There's other things we can kind of do with this as well, but what I wanted to show you, and this is something that we can kind of do some interesting things with, there's something called before and after. What before and after allow you to do is actually add content to a web page after the HTML has been published to put content before something or content after something. Okay. So I have this H1 here. I'm going to select that H1. And actually, what I'm going to do is say before. And then I'm going to say content. Now, content means what is it that we're placing? So let's just look at this real quick. You just have this text here. I want to put like, I don't know, maybe I'll put like one of those little star symbols. So I'm going to say before the text, let's put a star or 2 stars. I don't care. Make it look fancy. All right, I'm going to hit save and then see how it actually put that before it. Now, if you actually look at the HTML, in the HTML, there is no star. It doesn't exist in the HTML. It only exists from the CSS, okay? And you can actually even see it here. It's actually showing you that it's putting this before this content, and it's causing this effect, okay? There's also a pseudo element called after, which basically does the same thing. Instead of putting something before it, it puts it after it. So I can do this. Okay, oops. So if I go back, you can see that something's being applied before it, something's being applied after it. Okay. Now in this case, I'm putting, stars, but it could really be anything. It could be dollars, exclamation points or whatever I want it to be. Okay. All right. So let me show you how we can kind of use this to do some fun stuff. I have 3 articles here. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now let's just say, for the sake of argument, after each one of these, I want there to be a some sort of border. Okay. So what I could do, I'm going to take each article. Let's do article after. Okay. I'll do content. And for now, let's just throw in something like, I don't know, like this. Okay. All right. I'm going to go back and you can see it's putting this here, right? You see that? So that's cool and everything. But here, I'm going to show you guys a little trick we can do some interesting stuff with. What if instead of putting like a symbol or a word or whatever, I just made it a space? Okay. So it's just an empty space. And I'm going to go back and let's preview this. And if you go and look at this, you'll notice I still get that after, right? See how it's like showing up right there? Now what I'm going to do is spaces are an inline element, but what I'm going to do is actually convert that element into a block. Okay, this goes back to that whole inline versus block thing. We've done this before. So I'm converting an inline into a block. Now that it's a block, I could give it a background color, like red. Now, at the moment, you're not seeing it because it's a block, but let's give it a height of, I don't know, 1 pixel. or I could even be like 5 pixels. Maybe I want this not to just be a solid color, but maybe I want it to be a gradient. So because this is considered basically a thin rectangle, I could, instead of doing a background, I could do a background color. We could just do background, and I could do linear gradients. Let's do 90 degrees, yellow to red. All right. And what's nice about this is it doesn't matter how much content there is. So if I were to take this article and add more content, it'll always place that item after the article. It doesn't matter how long or how short it is. So it's like, I'm kind of using this and just kind of making it kind of interesting here. You know what I mean? Yeah, so you can kind of see how you're going to see, if you look at some tutorials, you may see some tutorials that, do something like this, where it's like, um, they use this sort of after content block and then make it into a block, and then they apply a background image or some sort of color or something that's going to apply to something after each element. Okay. So this is kind of some interesting techniques here. If you don't want to use it, you don't have to use it, but I'm just kind of showing it to you. Okay.